All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it is preseason ranking time. It is time for us to unveil the top 25 for the Irrational Confidence Podcast preseason poll. We're going from 25 to 21 in this episode. And my co-host, the best years of his life, 25 through 21. Fresh, how you doing?
Pretty spot on there, Haps. About 25 to 21 is pretty good years. I'm doing great. Ready to record another 5 teams that we have. We have a lot of high thoughts on, and just continue to dive into college football season and get us ready for the fall.
Yeah, so our number 25 team in the country this year, I think last year we slept on them a little bit and made that mistake. We're not going to repeat our same mistake twice, and that is going to be the Pittsburgh Panthers coming in at number 25. Pat Narduzzi has just been consistently a solid coach there in the ACC. This could be an interesting year for Pitt. You feel like every single time that you say, they had Kenny Pickett 2 years ago and you expect to drop off. Then everything goes down last year. They lose a lot of defensive talent this past year. They lost Jordan Addison 2 years ago. And you expected a drop off, but didn't happen. So last year, you take a look at what Pitt did in the ACC. They were 9-4 overall, 5-3 in the ACC. Had some big wins, some tough losses. They played Tennessee real tough in the second week of the season last year. Really, really close game. And then you have a couple of losses that don't look so pretty. That lost to Georgia Tech there. But then winning the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, beating the UCLA Bruins to cap off the year. Fresh, talk to me a little bit about the Pitt Panthers.
I think you brought up right off the bat of past 2 years of having players go out. Obviously, 2 years ago, Addison transferred out. Kenny Pickett left. And this past year, Khalija Kancey at tackle gone. Abakanda at running back gone, along with a host of other defensive players. But one thing Pat Narduzzi's done over the past few years is just continue to just develop players, bring in talent. They're not getting top 20 recruiting classes every single year, but they're getting guys in that fit his mold, that fit the Pitt mold. And they have a history there. If you haven't even looked at it, Pitt football history is pretty extensive. And I'll dive into it on a different occasion, but they cultivate players, they develop in their own mold, and they all play together, and they play tough. They embrace the entire Pitt mentality of we are going to be hardcore, blue collar, and we're going to get it done. And that's just another embodiment of what this football team is coming forward this year. You're going to have guys who've been on that depth chart, and they're going to rise up, and they're going to now become the leaders, like running back Rodney Hampton Jr., who ran for 459 yards and 5 touchdowns last year, or wide receiver Kanata Mumpfield, who had 551 yards receiving and a touchdown as a freshman. These guys are now going to be called upon to step up and take on their role as the next players at Pitt. And what are they going to be able to carry forward this year? We're going on to our third quarterback. Last year, Keaton Slovis arrived on campus. He's supposed to be the next guy behind Kenny Pickett, transferring in there for USC. And he was okay. But he was not phenomenal. Exit him out to BYU. Incoming in, Phil Jurkovic from Boston College. Had a great year 2 years ago. Last year was kind of beat up, but still had a big target there in Zay Flowers. Now he's getting a chance to remake his image, staying in the ACC, coming over here to Pitt. It's a veteran quarterback for Coach Narduzzi. It's going to be interesting to see how he gets back in that groove under the offensive system. They are going to be a run the football, but they're going to have that play action ability and that passing game that was actually pretty lethal last year. They averaged 31 points a game, 405 yards per offense per game. But the problem really was the passing game, getting the ball in the end zone was not the issue. They could throw between the tens, but 13 touchdown passes and 11 interceptions is kind of getting more stability at the quarterback position and making this offense take it to the next level. I think that's where we're going to hopefully see from Jurkovic compared to Keaton Slovis from last year. That's kind of what you meant with the clunker losses with the Georgia Tech, where you thought you had the pieces in place, but they just didn't show up when they had to. Slovis played great versus West Virginia in the opener. He played really good versus Tennessee, almost got the upset. But then a game like Georgia Tech just wasn't there. You kind of hope you don't have that coming up this year. Pitt did lead the nation in sacks last year with 44, so it wasn't just all about the offense. They had 18 different guys contributed to that 44 sacks. That's a depth opportunity right there where it's not just one or two guys. Some other schools might have one or two guys who come in there and they are 40% of all the team sacks or 50% or whatever. This team, it's spread among them all. It's not just one guy. And you kind of look, Yeah, Cansey had 7, Dennis had 7, Desmond Alexander had 5.5. They're all in the NFL, so that's a nice chunk. But they're looking at Solomon Shields, who had 4, defensive linemen Deion Hayes, David Green, John Morgan III, and Tyler Bentley. They all had a collection of sacks that contributed to those 44. What can they do as now getting more depth, more elevated on the depth chart? How are they going to be able to play on this defense? Pat Narduzzi is a defensive guy, came from Michigan State, and that continued mentality of we're going to be rough and tough and play physical defense is going to carry forward. And will these guys be able to take advantage of that opportunity and take their game to the next level? The defense was second in the ACC in yards allowed, so that's another thing. Where they're going to shut people down. They're getting sacks. They're getting after it. Can the offense give them more balance this year? That's how they got the win versus UCLA. The defense rose up in the second half, and the offense found ways to go. Is that a more of a springboard for what we're going to see this season? I kind of feel it will because they're all bringing back. They're not the stars of the defense, but they're bringing the depth of the defense. And that's going to be able to. Now they have their chance. They've seen what Clancy did and Cansey did going in the NFL and get drafted. Obviously, Aaron Donald is an alumni of Pitt, and they've seen his success. But really, you come in now. It's your opportunity. What are you going to be able to do with it? And that's what I'm more intrigued about this year than looking at the offensive side. I think the defense is actually have a step higher and really be able to lock it down. The schedule is actually kind of manageable. There's only really two game stretches that are going to be tough for them. They're going to have to be able to somehow survive. You have at West Virginia on September 16th, and you have hosting UNC on September 23rd. And then later in October, you have at Notre Dame the 28th, and then November 4th, you host Florida State. There's a combination of a non-conference conference games there. If they can somehow go 2-2 in that 4-game stretch, this team has a lot of opportunity to really, move forward. Maybe even make a run for the ACC title. There are no more divisions now. It's a singles league. Top 2 teams play for a championship. Get involved back in that New Year's Six where they had 2 years ago. That's where I kind of see this team going. If they play under the radar, they're not the flashy North Carolina. They're not Clemson. They're not Florida State getting all the pub and the hype. They're not the U running around flashing up the U. They're Pitt, and they just do it their own way. And they do it the right way. And I think that's what's going to help keep them going this entire season as the offense develops along with Jerkovic and the defense starts out strong. They don't have to play Tennessee this year, even though they had a chance last year of pulling off the upset and winning both those games that series. I'm really excited what the team's going to bring. And the end of the season actually plays out really well for them. They have 3 games left. The last 3 games are Syracuse, Boston College, and at Duke. If they're sitting pretty and they've somehow survived those two game sets that I mentioned earlier, that final 3 could really take them into a high place and possibly even a top 10 finish, top 8 finish. And we're talking about them in January. Now the problem is living up to expectations and not sneaking up on people. We've seen this other teams where sometimes they get the pub early and they don't live up to it. I think this team actually has the grit and the innards and the integrity to live up to it. And I think with the quarterback stability, if Jerkovic can stay healthy, that will give them an extra bonus there. I see the floor for this football team. The floor is 9-3, and the ceiling is 10-2. I think they're going to lose to North Carolina and Florida State, unfortunately, those conference losses. But I think they can beat Notre Dame and they can beat West Virginia. It just sort of sees how the ACC is going to shake out. They make the title game or not. But this team, the worst they're going to be is 9-3. The best in the regular season will be 10-2, in my opinion.
When are we going to start putting some respect on Pat Narduzzi's name? I really think that as a coach for Fresh, because, when are we going to start talking about him as one of the better, I would say in the top 15, top 20 of college football coaches in all of college football? Because it just seems like year in and year out, when everyone starts to doubt the Panthers, that he does something. He like you talked about player development, and he brings these guys up. He reminds me a lot of Mark D'Antoni at Michigan State when he would bring in guys who are 2 or 3-star prospects, and then all of a sudden they would develop those players. They'd get them into their weight program. Next thing you know, Michigan State is a very formidable opponent, pulling off upsets left and right. That's kind of how I see Pat Narduzzi. And I really think he is maybe one of the best defensive coaches in all of college football. And I say that because offense is what gets everyone talking. Offensive games, the lighting up the scoreboard and putting 45, 50 points a game up there is what's going to get you on ESPN and get you into the top 10 plays and stuff like that. And he's had that the last 2 years with Kenny Pickett and Addison, and then last year with Abaconda. you look at this team, and I think you're spot on. I think this team's going to have to be led by its defense. You got a lot of moving parts with the offense. Again, you need to give that offense a little bit of time to gel, especially early on that season. That, like you said, the early on of the season is kind of manageable. Wolford to start the season, Cincinnati, and then at West Virginia. Going into Morgantown, that's a 7:30 kickoff already been announced on ABC. You're looking at the first really challenging game. It is at home, and that's versus North Carolina, and that's in week 4 on September 23rd. I really like how this schedule lays out for them. I think that it's going to give them a lot of time to build up, give Jerkovich some time to really get into this offense there, create that type of chemistry that we think that he needs to have with Mumfield. I think Mumfield's going to be the big piece for him because Jerkovich is built like the prototypical like professional quarterback. 6'5" seniors guy cannot have an arm. But this is the third time he's transferred. A lot of people don't realize Jerkovich started off at Notre Dame, went to Boston College. Now he's over at Pitt trying to finish off his doctoral season here for his college football career. But as much as people want to go to the offense, I feel like that we need to give the credit for the defense. Take a look at them. They wound up last season, they wound up with 14 interceptions on the year for 254 yards. That means that per interception, they were averaging a return of 18 yards every time they got a turnover there. So you're adding basically a first down and a little more than almost 2 first downs on every time you got a turnover. That is huge when it comes to field position. And I think if Pitt can kind of continue that, you take a look. You talked about how many sacks they accumulated throughout the year, how much they put pressure on the quarterback to make those poor decisions. Then they capitalized every single time they got those turnovers there. Pitt, they need to take care of the ball a little bit better than they did last year. Had a lot of problems with fumbling the football. Again, you're right. The schedule's not as brutal as it was last year, where it's a little tougher. But the game I'm really circling right now is November 4th versus Florida State. It's coming off the week before you're in South Bend against Notre Dame. That week 4 game, that is Florida State's last chance of really losing a game. Florida State has a tougher first half of the season, first 4 games, and then they kind of get into a pretty easy form of the ACC schedule. Pitt is that last beacon of either are you going to be holding Florida State out of Charlotte for the ACC title game and getting their shot at Clemson, or is someone like North Carolina going to come out there? I'm real excited to see how Florida State travels north in the month of November and how they're able to do it. I'm looking at this schedule here fresh with you. I kind of say the same thing. I got their floor at about 8 wins myself. I think this is at worst case scenario, if nothing goes right for them, I got 8 wins for them. I think they can pull it off and wind up at a bowl game. And again, if everything starts to click and goes correct, it's going to come down. Those are 2 tough back-to-back games at Notre Dame and hosting Florida State. That early season game at home versus North Carolina is tough. I'll say this is an 11-win ceiling team.
And I think you mentioned Narduzzi out of the D'Antonio mold. Obviously, he coached with them real under him. He understands what it takes to build a program, and I think that's going to continue to produce special things for Pitt and as the timeline moves forward, not just this year but years in the future.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to our number 24 team here, and this is just tough to talk about, man, because it's our number 24 team is Mississippi State, and it's just not the same without the Pirate there. It's sad to say that because we talked at the end of last season with when Coach Mike Leach passed away. It was really difficult for us to talk about. Both of us were huge fans of Coach Leach and really had some high expectations for him and held him in high regards just for his interviews, for everything that he did. And it's interesting because we go from an offensive guru who really just could scheme up anything to a defense-oriented coach. You have Will Rogers coming back as the quarterback there. You take a look, you've seen what he has done in his career. The dude has thrown for 82 touchdowns already in his career. You're looking at, on top of that, almost, I think you're coming close to 10,000 yards in 3 years. Are they able to keep up the same offensive firepower? You know, is Mississippi State and the Bulldogs and the Cowbells, are the Cowbells going to be ringing? Are we going to be saying, I need more cowbell this season with Mississippi State? I know it's going to be tough. They really need to see what they're going to do, replace those skill position players going into the season here. Lost quite a bit. But when you return an experienced quarterback like Will Rogers, you know, you kind of feel like you're in safe hands there. But then, you know, you take a look at Mississippi State's schedule. 9-4 last year, 4-4 in the SEC. The SEC West, that's a brutal, brutal thing. And you take a look at their non-con schedule. Southeastern Louisiana, Arizona, and Western Michigan, and Southern Miss. Not a murderer's row, but then you talk about you end the season with the Egg Bowl versus Ole Miss. That's never easy. Got to go to Kyle Field. Your cross games right now are Kentucky and South Carolina. South Carolina's really, really will be pretty good. So, Fresh, I'll turn it over to you. Mississippi State Bulldogs, you know, swing your sword here, Fresh.
Well, I mean, you brought up a great point, the philosophy change. We're going from the wide open air raid onto the pirate, to Zach Arnett, who's been his defensive coordinator for the past few years and put together one of the better defenses in the conference and maybe even top 35 in the country. Knows how to do it. So this is going to be, I think, a whole change mentality wise, because they even said, you know, I can't do what Coach Leach did. I've got to be my own man. So I got a feeling it's not going to be as wide open an offense. They're going to probably play a little more of a try to find a balanced running game, help the defense out, and try to build it out that way. Because in the end, his job is to win football games, and you can't worry about the shadow of Coach Leach over him. You can't build the program in Leach's model. You have to build it in your own identity. So that's kind of where I think needs to take that approach. But even for Will Rogers, you could definitely tell in the bowl game last year, the entire football team, including himself, a quarterback, the emotions of playing for Coach Leach, playing for the Pirate, it kind of hovered over the entire game, and they just couldn't get through. They couldn't break through until late. Yes, they won the ball game, but they didn't look comfortable because they were playing with so much emotion. I got a feeling Coach Leach would not want them to be doing that. He wants them to go out there and have fun, play open, play carefree. And I think they need to have that mentality of, if you try to play too much pressure on it and play for Coach Leach the too much pressure, it might actually be a hindrance. Play open, play free, because that's what Coach Leach wants you to do. Will Rogers, second most passing yards in the SEC last year behind Stetson Bennett. That's the one thing people don't understand. Like, it wasn't other guys. It was Stetson Bennett as the leader, but Will Rogers was number two. That was your 1-2 in terms of passing yards in the league. The offense scored 31.3 points a game, which in most years, maybe 20 years ago, that would have been tops in the league. That was eighth. So the game has definitely changed in the SEC. And the 392 yards passing per game on offense, but eighth in the league. The offense, for all the flair and everything about being the wide open, air raid, it wasn't actually as explosive as people thought it would be. The defense kept them in football games behind it. Obviously, well-acclaimed Emmanuel Forbes, his pick sixes and being drafted in the first round. The defense definitely carried the weight a lot last year. The offense got all the notoriety. But they were, they've got to find balance, because you had the best passing game at 311 yards per game, but you ran for 81.7. You've got to find a little balance there to help keep the defense in some rest, get them off the field, maintain the pace of play. I think that's what Coach Arnett and that new offensive staff and that team itself are going to have to try to find a way to do. Run the ball a little more successfully, find balance, help take the pressure off the quarterback and pressure off the defense as you move forward. They also lost their leading receiver, Ra Thomas. He's transferred to Georgia. So now they've got to make up for it with Rufus Harvey and LaKendrick Griffin. Those got to be the two league receivers. They were number 2 and 3 last year. What can they do? Can they elevate their game, add more receptions? Last year, it went from Polk, who went to the draft. Thomas came in and took over for him. You kind of see that philosophy keep changing there. They do have the depth. They do have the number 1 and number 2 overall in total tackles in the SEC, the linebackers, returning, in Jet Johnson and Nathaniel Watson. Can the two of those guys take their game to the next level? They each had well over 100 tackles each in total tackles. Can they maybe go to 120, 130? Can they get more sacks? Can they force some more turnovers? They're going to be called upon to take the next step. And it's lofty, but if they can do that and continue to help build this defense and put it on their shoulders, it makes games in the SEC, it makes games in any conference more manageable to win if you're keeping the opponents off the field and you're shutting them out of the end zone and forcing field goals or turnovers. It's going to be a lot of pressure on Zach Arnett, too. The bowl game is one thing, but now you're coming into it as a whole season, everything on you. How do you fit this mold? You've never been a head coach before in college football. Your first ever job now is coaching at Mississippi State. This is going to be an interesting carry for him. I don't think he's going to have to be calm. Rely on people who've been mentors for you. Rely on your gut. If you've called the game defensively before, don't change it because you're the head coach now. Also, trust your assistants. Can't shoulder it all. You've got to push some of it away and let other people help develop. Let the players play. Come together. Don't try to do it all yourself. Rely on other people because you can become overwhelmed, and that would only become a problem for you and a problem for the team. You've got to be the rock. You've got to be that constant for them. And if you are, the team will flourish because there's definitely talent there in Starkville. You do get LSU, Alabama, Kentucky, and Ole Miss at home. That is a benefit. You have the home crowd. You don't have to go to Tuscaloosa or Baton Rouge. If you can steal one of those games, maybe even two, you're in a great spot. If you go 0-4, this season might get rocky because those are the games you at least got to steal one or two of those. That's going to be the key for this football team. You mentioned South Carolina. I think that series can be a battle itself, but at home, you've got to find ways to get some of those big wins. So some of those four games are circled, in my opinion, when it comes down to it. In the end, I think the ceiling, if this team plays absolutely perfect and everything comes together for them, they're 10-2. I don't see them being Alabama or LSU, but everybody else they have a fighting chance against. The floor, though, and that's kind of how widespread this team is, the floor can be 6-6. It just really depends on, can the defense play as tall as they have been, and can Will Rogers in the offense be a little better this year and find more balance? If they can, it could be a special season in Starkville. If not, 6-6, make a bowl game, regroup, take a pulse check of the program, and go from there. But that's kind of where I see this team's going to be in 2023. Excuse me.
Fresh, you're a little more bullish on Mississippi State than I am. It's a tough one because getting up for a bowl game to honor your late coach is really it's one thing, and then trying to live in those shadows the following year, and it's going to be this year is going to be a challenge. Now, what can if I'm talking to a Mississippi State fan and I want to try to give you something to go off of, like, we could rehash a lot of the players that you talked about, but I think one of the most important things for Mississippi State is their new offensive coordinator, Kevin Barbay. Okay, name that unless you're a diehard college football fan, I don't think that registers with you. And I would challenge. Fresh, do you know where Kevin Barbay was before he got to Mississippi State?
I'm going to take a guess. He was somewhere in the FCS.
He was App State for a year, and then previously he was the one of the key components for Central Michigan, the Chippewas. Now I went back and I took a look at because he was the offensive coordinator in 2021 for Central Michigan. Listen to this though. Central Michigan in 2021 averaged 57 points a game. 57 points a game at Central Michigan.
Those are fighting Jim McElwain's, aren't they?
That's insane. They had over 300 first downs. They're almost 60% on fourth down. And the crazy thing, people are like, oh, well, they must have thrown the ball all over the place. Well, they had Daniel Richardson at the time, really good quarterback there. But then they also had Lou Nichols III as a running back, had 1,800 yards rushing there. It was an extremely balanced offense. And you take a look at this. Richardson threw for 24 touchdowns that year. Nichols ran for 16 touchdowns as well. This was a really balanced offense. And I think that may transfer very nicely for Mississippi State this year. I think that this could only benefit Will Rogers. I'm looking at this. I think that there is a stark difference in what Mississippi State could have with glass half empty and what they could have for glass half full. I'm going even worse for you here, Fresh. My floor for Mississippi State is a 5-win season. And I almost said 4-win season because I only see
You
four.
say you're saying they go 0-8 in the SEC.
I'm saying that they could. I'm not saying they will. I'm saying if things don't come together the right way. And again, this goes back to the culture thing, losing a coach, being able to pick yourself up because you play in such a difficult side of the conference in the West. I'm saying that you could see that your only wins be against Southern Miss, Western Michigan, Arizona, and Southeastern Louisiana. You could go 0-8, but I'll say this: I'm saying 5 wins as my floor. My ceiling for them, I'm gonna say 9 wins. I'm not gonna go 10. I'm with you. I don't think that they're gonna beat Alabama or LSU, even though you get both of those games at home. And then I think somewhere along the line you're going to slip up. Whether or not I think Texas A&M will be a little bit better this year. Old Miss in the Egg Bowl is always going to be a tough game that could always go either way. So I think 9 wins is the best case scenario for Mississippi State, but I think that I'm nervous about them. So I'm hoping for the best because I have such respect for Coach Leach, and I'd love to see them, continue his legacy of performing well. I'm just being realistic.
And just so you know, folks, this is, the two schools in Mississippi. It's a little touchy subject in this podcast. The reason why the podcast exists because back in 2021, I said Ole Miss and Mississippi State would be exciting, and Seth said, "Let's start a podcast." So they're going to be
That's
heavily
true.
connected no matter what in the entire history of this podcast.
That's true. And I'd much rather talk nicely about Mississippi State than Old Miss. So, but Ole Miss has got a running back that I absolutely love. But let's go to the number 23 team in our top 25 here, and that is going to be the South Carolina Gamecocks. What a weird year 2022 was for them. 8-5 overall, 4-4 in the SEC. Lose at Arkansas, get shellacked by Georgia, and then kind of have to pick themselves up off the map, go beat Charlotte. Good job. Congratulations on all your success. Then South Carolina State kind of picked themselves off the mat. Then you see win versus Kentucky, win versus Texas A&M, but everyone was beating Texas A&M at the time. But then they have 2 losses that I feel are like just ugly, ugly losses.
Inexplicable.
You lose to Missouri at home and not like a close loss like they won on a last second field goal or something like that. And then you go into the swamp and get boat raced. And then all of a sudden, the following week, you put the boots to Tennessee and you beat Clemson, but then they lose in the Gator Bowl here in Jacksonville. I don't know. South Carolina is a fascinating thing to me. Can they be really, really good? I love Shane Beamer. I think he's a phenomenal coach. He is probably my favorite coach right now in the SEC because outside of Heupel, because I love Josh Heupel. But Shane Beamer is phenomenal, and I like what he's doing over there. But there's a limitation. Spencer Rattler looked better coming in at the end of last year than what he did. What is he going to get back? We were talking about this kid as a Heisman finalist, but then like the other problem too I have with culture South Carolina, how many of those players opted out of that Gator Bowl game? Like so many of South Carolina's, I want to say, what was it, like their top 4 rushers opted out of that
Yep,
game or
I
something
think
like that?
top 4. They even had a lead in that game versus Notre Dame. They blew a lead late. It just doesn't. It's kind of what's going on. And I think that's actually the way the season started, the way the season ended are probably the perfect microcosm of South Carolina.
This is not an easy schedule for them. Look at their first 5 games. They have their bye week in the first week of October. Their first 5 games to start the season. Neutral site game versus North Carolina and Drake May. That could go either way. That's going to be a barn burner of a game. You got your Cupcake Furman week 2, but then you got to go to Athens to play Georgia. You go on the road to Mississippi State. We just said, talking about Mississippi State, we don't know what's going to be from them, but they do have Will Rogers, great matchup there. And then the end of September to finish off, you got to go to Neyland and play the Tennessee Volunteers, who are going to be looking for a revenge factor. You could see, South Carolina, could you see a 1-4 start?
You could see 1-4. You could see 4-1. I think it all comes down to Spencer Rattler. I think that's which Spencer Rattler we're going to get. And the team, their ebbs and flows last year were solely on him. The defense wasn't world beaters. You had 2 corners who got drafted and went to the NFL, and that's great. Zach Pickens, a great defensive lineman. He got drafted going to the NFL. They're all gone. And the defense even wasn't the best even to start out with, and you've lost 3 great players who all got drafted. That right there kind of worries me. Where's this depth coming from? Guys opting out, guys transferring in and out. Like, where's the depth culture at? One thing is Shane Beamer's a great coach, great motivator, has recruited very well for South Carolina's first 2 years. But it all comes down to Spencer Rattler. Which product do you get? Their offensive coordinator, who had them up and down all last year, he's now joining Matt Rule out there in Lincoln, Nebraska. So now you have to get an all new communication system in there for Rattler. How's he going to be able to bond with the receivers, bond with the running backs, get the offensive line ready to go? This is going to be the make or break year for him. If he struggles this year, his draft prospects that everyone thought in 2020 that he would have been a great quarterback, they're gone. The team winning could be down the drain. This is going to be, I think, a gut check point for Shane Beamer, though, because going into SEC Media Days last year, this fancy little video of him putting on glasses and microphones coming down and lights everywhere and trying to be the superstar young guy and bringing some little life to the program. You didn't really get that feel early on the season. He got thumped, obviously, you said, this, against the Dogs there in Columbia. Kind of waded through the weeds, got thumped by the Gators, got the inexplicable loss to Missouri, and then blows out Tennessee. And the thing is, they had the big lead before Hooker got hurt. It wasn't like Hooker got hurt the first play and it was over. Hooker was in the game for a while, and they were already pulling away. And then you go down and you take care of Clemson. So now the pressure's on. There's no we'll sneak up on guys in year 3. You made your statement. So now all the eyes are on you, and you've got to deliver. You've got to be more consistent offensively, too. You averaged 370 yards a game, which was 9th in the league. You've got to find ways to keep drives going. And the thing is, they scored 60 points against Tennessee and 50 against Charlotte and South Carolina State. So there's 3 games where that offense, they put points on the board, and the offense was still ranked so low. That's kind of worrisome when it comes down to what are they going to do this year. They scored 32 points a game, which was 7th in the league. Much lower if you take out the last 3 games. If you remove that Clemson, Tennessee, and the bowl game, they scored 28.6 in those first 10 games. And that includes 50 versus Charlotte and the 56 versus South Carolina State. So the offense is up and down, up and down, up and down. You don't know what you're going to get on a game-to-game basis. And it actually is kind of scary. And if you only looked at SEC play, they scored 26 points a game in SEC play. That's not going to get it done. We already talked about 31 points a game for Mississippi State, and that was 9th in the league. You score 26, you're going to get swamped by everybody. So where is this team going to turn to? How are they going to function offensively? How is Rattler going to handle the pressure? The games he had success in are when the pressure was not on him, and he could just go out and play free. He had nothing to lose versus Tennessee, and he was kind of like, all right, we're going to go and chuck it around and have a good time. He had nothing to lose versus Clemson. They weren't supposed to win. They come out there and take care of business. The pressure was on against second half versus Notre Dame. The pressure was on versus Georgia. They got thumped. So him between the ears is going to be the biggest thing of what Shane Beamer, how can he mature his quarterback to get him to play? And also, if the season's just getting to struggle point, does Beamer have the strength and the wherewithal to pull Rattler? Because a team has to be greater in some situations than the quarterback. And if he's holding your team back, just because he's a senior, he's been there forever, does Shane Beamer pull him and make a change? That's what I want to watch the entire season it plays out. Defensively, 9th in the league, 10th in points allowed. Where's they going to get that development from? All these guys are going to have to step up their play and take it not just one notch higher. They're going to have to go 3 or 4 notches higher. And you mentioned earlier, they traveled now in Athens. They travel to Knoxville. Your two biggest games of the entire season are both on the road. So those defensive players are not going to have the comforts of home. They're not going to have Cocky coming out with the smoke and all that nonsense. They're going to have to show up on the biggest spotlight on the road. Where's this team going to be ready at? Where's this team under Shane Beamer? What's the true identity? Are they we're going to surprise someone and get one or two games here and there, but be mundane the rest of the way? Or are we truly going to be an ascending program? I think Tennessee showed to be an ascending program, you've got to make a statement early. You've got to win big games. You've got to beat Alabama. In this case, for Shane Beamer, you've already beat Tennessee, but you've got to beat Georgia. I don't think it's going to happen this year. They're probably not there yet, but that's the game you've got to take the next step at. Looking at going forward, you can't have clunker losses either. The Missouri one and the Florida loss, you can't have those. Like those are games you should win. The games versus the big teams where you can sort of toss a coin, maybe, or maybe not supposed to win, but at least it's one or two losses, but everything else you should win. You can't lose the clunkers because that also shows the program integrity of they're not ready to show up in big games. And they're not ready to show up for the games they should win. They just want to walk out there, roll the ball out, play maybe 4 games a year, but in the other games they sort of just think, well, it'll happen. You've got to show up for every football game, no matter what conference you're in, and that's going to be the big focal point. You can't have the clunker losses. You can't lose games you're supposed to win because bowl games become contracts and bowl games become future at the school. Bowl games become recruiting. All those stuff play into getting that 6th to 7th, 8th to the 9th win. And if you're losing clunkers, you're putting the rest of the season in peril because who knows how the rest of the season is going to shake out. I'm worried about the integrity of the schedule and how it is going to be much more difficult than last year's. And you got some revenge. You got Tennessee and Clemson, who obviously now you have their attention and they're going to be ready to go. Where's this team going to come? Is Spencer Rattler truly the guy? I think the floor is 7-5, and I think the ceiling is 10-2. Those 2 losses, Tennessee and Georgia. They're still not that elite SEC East team yet, but if they can go 10-2 with the losses of Tennessee and Georgia, it at least helps them get to a point where they want to continue to move forward to January bowl games. But 7-5 is the lowest this team can be, and if it's 7-5, I think whispers start for Shane Beamer on maybe is he the guy? Can he be consistent? So we'll see what happens in Columbia. It's one of the best home environments in the SEC. Maybe that helps them get an extra couple of wins this season, but 7-5, 10-2 is somewhere I have them in the target.
Yeah, their leading running back, Marshawn Lloyd, transferred to USC this year. You take a look at Jaheim Bell, a tight end who had 73 carries, 261 yards in that position. He's gone out of South Carolina. He's off to Florida State. Juju McDowell is your lead running back. You don't have a lot of stuff coming back, especially running the football, which puts so much pressure on Rattler. And that's going to be the question. If Spencer Rattler can show us that he can handle that pressure, and I know you got Wells out there on the outside, great wide receiver there, 68 catches, 900 plus yards last season. Okay, great. But the problem is for me, and this is where I get really stuck up on this fresh, is having so many questions offensively on their weapon wise. Like, I get it with Spencer Rattler and Wells, but then you have so many questions at tight end, running back, the number 2 receiver there, that when you go up against the start of the schedule like we laid out in the month of September, that's difficult, man. That's really, really difficult there. And then on top of that, you look at how you end the season. Yeah, you end the season playing 4 straight home games. Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt. But then, Kentucky's never going to be an easy game. Clemson could be playing for a shot at the playoff there, so they're not going to take that game lightly. That's going to be tough. You got to go to Kyle Field, too, to play the Aggies. I don't know. And maybe this is a blessing in disguise for me because, like I told you, I like Shane Beamer a lot. I really do. But I don't want Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Anyone who knows me will tell you all the time, I think Shane Beamer needs to go home and go back and rescue the Virginia Tech program right now. So if it takes South Carolina going 5-7 this year to fire Shane Beamer so he can go to Virginia Tech and revive that program, well, sign me up for 5-7 for South Carolina. I don't care. I that's my floor for them. I got them at lowest at 5-7 because of, and again, I have questions about the weapons. around him. Yes, you're going to beat Furman. Yes, you're going to beat Vanderbilt, Jacksonville State there, and probably Missouri. There's 4 wins right there. And the question is, can you, as long as you pick one up against either Mississippi State, Florida, or Kentucky, one of those 3 there, then there's your 5 wins. That North Carolina game's tough to me to start the season. I think we're going to learn very quickly about South Carolina. I think we're going to know what it is. I don't like the idea of South Carolina being an elite team. Maybe I'm going to eat my words on this one, but I think that they are a middle of a tier pack right now. Now again, I think that they're a decent team. I still think they're decent. There is talent there in Columbia, but I don't see more than I'm going to go. My floor is 5 wins. I'll say my ceiling is I'll scratch 8 wins out of it. But when I say it, I'm scratching 8 wins.
Now, we'll leave you with this. Is it worrisome if you're the quarterback coming off of a high at the end of the year, the way the offense is playing, to see all those players want to transfer out?
That's what scares me.
Your teammate who came with you from Oklahoma to South Carolina, the tight end, is now going back to Norman. And your other tight end obviously went to Florida State. Like, that does kind of worry me of maybe he's the problem. But, hey, we'll see this fall.
We will see this fall, but you're spot on there, Fresh. It does concern me quite a bit. It does make me very, very nervous, especially Lloyd going to USC. And, you're looking at this. Austin Jones is the lead running back there in USC. And they also got a really good freshman in Raleek Brown. I think both of those guys are over there. I got to go back and check the transfer portal again to make sure that they didn't transfer out. But the fact that you go even that point, you're saying, hey, it's a great idea. I'm the lead guy. I'm the head guy. And I want to go. And South Carolina is a respected program. It's not like we're talking about, I'm transferring from Northern Illinois to a program to get a little more recognized. So I'm looking at going, yeah, neither one of those running backs transferred out of USC. So Lloyd is leaving South Carolina, where he's the man, to face 2 guys who he'll be splitting carries. He may be the 3rd running back on the depth chart in South Carolina at Southern California. That makes me very nervous. That's why I'm not as bullish on South Carolina going into the season. I'm very nervous that this could get ugly real fast, quick, fast, and in a hurry. All right, Fresh, let's go to our number 22 team here. I like this. The Texas Tech Red Raiders, making our top 25, 8-5 last season, 5-4 in the Big 12 there. You take a look at how they started the season. That loss early in the year to North Carolina State in Raleigh, that's a tough one, but played a classic of a game. You guys want to watch a great college football game, go back and watch the Texas versus Texas Tech football game in the 4th Saturday in September last year. Great football game, but then you see they lose to K-State, they lose to Oklahoma State, lose to Baylor, lose to TCU, but then they win a classic game versus Oklahoma at the end of the year. That game goes into overtime, Thanksgiving weekend. And then they go to the Texas Bowl and put the boots to lane train in the Ole Miss Running Rebels. I don't know what to make of Texas Tech right now here, Fresh. I'll let you start with Texas Tech, because this is an interesting team to me.
We'll see. I think interesting is probably a great way to put it. I did my rankings, the top coaches in the Big 12 all the way down, 1 through whatever. And I had Joey McGuire at the bottom because he's only been a head coach for 1 season. That was last year. You really you don't have much room to base that. It was a great year. It was a lot of talent. You had obviously Tyree Wilson on the defense. This is what we're going to find out about Joey McGuire and that Texas Tech Red Raider football program going forward. What is his true imprint on this entire team, and how are they going to be able to play now and going forward? He's been an assistant at Baylor for a while. big-time legendary high school coach in Texas, but now your second year in charge. How did you put your imprints on the team last year during the offseason, during spring football, into fall camp, and how do you take it forward with expectations? This team has talent. Where can he take them, and how can he guide them going forward? There's no lack of facilities. There's no lack of notoriety. If you ever want to see what the new Texas Tech football facilities are like, just go online. They're immaculate. They've put so much money in there between Under Armour and obviously Patrick Mahomes and other people who have come through Lubbock. Football is the only thing that matters out there because there's not much out there in that part of Texas. They have everything you want from a recruiting perspective to get guys in there from Texas, and they put them in there and they play football. And now it's up to McGuire to get them to deliver. Those 3 overtime games you mentioned were wins last year. Those are the difference between 7-5 regular season or add 3 more losses and they're not even going to a bowl game because they had the 1 bowl win. That's a big difference right there. They got lucky in overtime. They were able to play tough and play through it. But if those games go the other way, we're not talking about Texas Tech, and they're didn't make a bowl game, and they're kind of out of it, and people are wondering if the football team's going to come through. So that's also expectations coming forward. You made the bowl game. You were 7-5, but those 3 games were all overtime wins. You've got to start. Was that just a luck situation, or is that a model of this football team being tough and be able to survive and move forward in the image of their head coach? Interesting to watch this season as it takes on. Defensively, they were pretty good, but they had the second best offense in the conference. That's where a lot of these points came up. This team was moving the football all over the place. 461 yards a game in total offense. I mean, they're moving the ball over the field, and they've played 3 different quarterbacks. 3 different quarterbacks threw for over 1,500 yards for this football team last year. The one I really have my eye on is Donovan Smith. He's been in and out of the.
He transferred.
He did transfer?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I apologize. Then is Tyler Shaw going to get the start then? So Tyler Shaw, he was the second quarterback. He was in on the lineup last year, transferred in from Oregon as well. What is he going to be able to do? He was nothing special Oregon, nothing special last year. That's why he was in and out of the lineup. This team offensively, they're going to have to rely on him. But Smith, I mentioned, left, had some legs there, was able to run around, play a little bit. Shaw does not have those mobile abilities. He is an arm quarterback only, and it's going to really be an interesting situation how this dynamic of the offense changes under him because he was not the most effective last year or the year before, and it kind of puts this entire team in a bind. They're going to have to find ways to move the football without him and in spite of him, I think, as the season moves forward. The running game, though, is going to have to be a big part of it when it looks like Taj Brooks. He split times last year on carries. He's going to have the full load this year. What's he going to be able to do? He's going to be able to handle the workload. That's going to be something I'm going to watch. And also top receiver, Jerran Bradley, had a nice solid season last year. He's now going to be the official number 1. Where's he going to be able to go with this offense and how they're going to be able to click and get going forward and moving on? That's some important things in the offense I'm trying to look at and trying to find out and see what this team's going to do because statistically, they were really good last year, but obviously with the one quarterback transferring out, it's a huge hit to what this offense is going to be able to do. And I'm not sure they're going to be able to live up to that same lofty standards they had last year. Defensively, we all know about Tyree Wilson. Had a heck of a season last year, had 7 sacks. He was drafted very, very high for his athletic ability, but they've got to improve. They still gave up 445 yards a game, and that was 7th in the league, and they gave up 29.5 points a game, which is also 7th in the league. They're going to need to find ways to get off the field, and they do return some playmakers, but they're going to have to find ways to keep people out of out of the end zone. They had a lot of sacks last year, but they're going to have to keep people out of the end zone. That falls really on Krishawn Merriweather, the linebacker, 3rd in the Big 12 in tackles last year with 112. How's he going to be able to take the next step and now live out of the shadows of Tyree Wilson? How's he going to be able to be the main guy in that Red Raider defense, get a little tougher, make sure they can get off the field? Because those overtime games, if they get off the field early, they're not playing in overtime. They're finding ways to win those football games. That's what's going to come down to this entire team and this defense. And also along with that, where are they going to get the sack production from with losing Tyree? Defensive lineman Tony Bradford Jr., Josiah Pierre, and Kossie Eldridge, they combined for 12.5 sacks last season. They're going to have to find ways to get that 12.5 to maybe 20 if they want to replicate what Tyree is departing with off that defense. Those issues right now, the open holes, you're going to have a better Oklahoma team. You're going to have a better Texas team. TCU will be a little bit down, but where can they be able to find ways to get off the field and improve defensively because the offense is not going to be as efficient and as explosive as it was. They open out Wyoming. They host Oregon. Probably can get 1-on-1, maybe 2-0 if they're lucky, but I think 1-on-one's find a way to split up that start. But the real manageable schedule after that is they don't have Oklahoma. They don't have Oklahoma State or Iowa State. You might get Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game, but you kind of avoid those three teams. You get the newbies. You take advantage of playing the BYUs, the Cincinnatis, the UCFs. They're not really ready for the level yet. You obviously placed Houston last year, but can you take advantage of the newbies and get some W's there and score and move up and get yourself in a good lofty standard to be prepared for that Texas game? That Texas game is going to make or break the entire season. You beat them last year, you have their attention. But if you can find a way to score a win there after beating everybody else, you're in a good spot. I really think the stretch, though, for this team at Baylor October 7th, K-State October 14th, BYU the 21st of October. That month of October, we're going to know what Texas Tech is. We're going to know if they're truly contenders and competing for a Big 12 title, or are they dealing with some serious roster holes that need to be fixed and maybe look forward to 2024 as the year for them to come through. In the end, I think the floor is 8 wins and the ceiling is 11. They can put it all together. They can find a way to get 11 wins. It's possible the Oregon game will be interesting, but the floor is 8, the ceiling is 11.
So, Fresh, it's going to be a great year for Texas Tech. And I'm jumping on the hype train early for them. I think that this is going to be a team that comes from the back half of our top 25 that finishes, and I'll call my shot right there. Texas Tech will finish as a top 15 team by the end of this season. That's how I feel about Texas Tech. Now, again, things have to go the right way within reasonable. Like they got to stay healthy, just like everyone else, within reason of staying healthy. Like, granted, you're going to have normal wear and tear injuries, but they got two really interesting freshmen, they're going to be sophomores this year. They were freshmen last year. Is Cameron Valdez right there? He was a running back last year, only got 18 carries, 169 yards in those 18 carries, but he was averaging over 9 yards a carry last year. Dude's electric. Got some speed on him. He's going to be looking to be that spell back behind Taj Brooks right there, who's their leading rusher coming back. And then on top of that, we talked about Jerand Bradley. The kid was a freshman last year. 6'5", 215. Probably will show up to camp around 220, 225 this year. As a freshman last year, had 51 catches for over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think that while last year, we talked a lot about the defense that Texas Tech ran, really, I think this offense could really be something special and really put up a lot of points, especially with defense being optional in the Big 12 at times. You talked about Tyler Shaw. I don't know if I'm Shaw. I don't know how to say the last name there, but you're right. He is more of a passing quarterback. But then you take a look at his game versus Ole Miss in the bowl game. Ran the ball 25 times for over 100 carries. Like, the kid does have a little bit wiggle. I think he's going to more likely want to stay back and throw the ball around here. But with Texas Tech, I think that there's a lot of offensive firepower that can make this a very, very fun team to watch. there are two teams this season going into the year that I kind of picked to start the year and say, who I'm going to be watching this year? I did this last year I told everyone, guys, we both said this last year. Everyone watched Tennessee. Tennessee was going to be a great offensive powerhouse last year. We knew that was coming there. I feel the same way about Texas Tech, not to the same level as Tennessee. I'm not saying that they're going to be a top 5 rated team at one point when the playoff comes out. Although they win that game against Oregon, and all bets are off because the rest of the schedule is really easy. You could get fat on the schedule. Fresh, I would challenge you. Do you know where Tarleton State University is?
Somewhere in Texas.
It is somewhere in Texas. They're the Texans. I got no clue where these guys are. If you guys know where Stevensville, Texas is where they are. But I take a look at the rest of Texas Tech, their schedule for there. That Oregon game is going to make or break this season. Because then Tarleton State, West Virginia, you talked about that stretch right before that bye week in October. But ending the season, home versus TCU, at Kansas, UCF, really setting up that showdown versus the Texas Longhorns there at the end of the season. I'm saying right now the floor for this team is 9 wins. I'm going high with Texas Tech. I am on the Texas Tech bandwagon early on. I'm saying that they're going to be a really good surprise team that not a lot of people are going to be shocked up there. Everyone's going to go, who saw Texas Tech coming? And I'm going to wave my hand at everyone. I'm saying I saw Texas Tech coming because everything sets up so nicely for their schedule. And even if Shaw wasn't the quarterback, this Morton kid's not bad either. And I'm not even going to try to say his first name. He's a freshman. He played well in his opportunities last year when he could. So I'm saying my floor 9 wins, and I'm going to say this: if everything goes right, Texas Tech could be undefeated going into the Big 12 title. 12-0.
They would be probably number one, number two in the country, and they who would they get a repeat the week after against Texas, back to back weeks?
Probably. Although if they have that win versus Texas, like depending on what else happened with Texas's schedule, because did Texas get past Kansas State? Did they get past Oklahoma? Like it definitely could be that
That could be like
repeat.
a quarterfinal. Yeah,
It,
that could be like a quarterfinal matchup.
I honestly think you're spot on right there. I think that's actually the best way to say it. I wouldn't be shocked if that last week of the season, get your popcorn ready on Friday, Black Friday of Thanksgiving week. Texas versus Texas Tech is going to be a quarterfinal game. I'm calling it right now.
Yep.
So I'm high on Texas Tech. I'm drinking the Red Raider Kool-Aid. Oh, wait, no, that's Oklahoma State that you do for. All right, let's go to our 21st team, our last team in this episode here. And everyone jump around because it's the Wisconsin Badgers. Luke Fickell taking over for Wisconsin. And the times they are a-changing at Camp Randall Stadium in Wisconsin. Gone are the days of Barry Alvarez, Chris, Jim Leonard, all gone. Wisconsin was 7-6 last year, 4-5 in the Big Ten, which is, people have to understand, that is a bad year for Wisconsin. There's some high expectations for Wisconsin football. Wisconsin has maybe, I would argue, top 3 running back in all of college football, and Braylon Allen. That kid's back, who's going to be absolutely a absolute beast. But you can't lose to Washington State at home, and you can't get Gillette. Well, you can. Ohio State puts the boots to you, but then Illinois putting the boots to you. Michigan State beating you in double overtime. That ugly game versus Iowa. But then all of a sudden they win their bowl game versus Oklahoma State. Obviously. The best news, and I'm Fresh, I'm gonna get excited about talking Wisconsin here and you're actually, people don't know this about you, and I'll peek behind the curtain for you, everyone. As we've gone through this, Fresh is obviously a very clear Georgia Bulldog fan, but as long as I've known Fresh, Wisconsin's always been his second favorite team.
I was born in
I mean,
Wisconsin. I moved when I was 3, so
there's
there's some ties to the
and
state.
there's reason for that, and rightfully so. That's not saying a bad thing. Again, I have a lot of respect for Wisconsin. I like Wisconsin. I just don't like playing them in Camp Randall. You take a look at what Wisconsin's doing this year. They bring in Tanner Mordecai from SMU. You got Braylon Allen. And guess what? I'm going to give Badgers fans the best news in the world. Graham Mertz is not your quarterback. He is going to play quarterback at Florida. So this is like the best possible scenario for Fresh right now. One, his second favorite team will be better this year. They got a great head coach in Luke Fickell. And his most hated rival, the team he despises the most, is picking up and possibly starting the worst quarterback in all of college football. Graham Mertz is not a good quarterback. I know it.
No,
You know it.
he's terrible.
This show knows it. This show has told you that for 2 years that Graham Mertz is not a good quarterback. I'm excited for Wisconsin. Because you talk about what they did last year, and I could sit here and as much as I'm joking around and making fun of some stuff right now, we could talk about everything that Wisconsin did last year. And you and I both know that we're going to throw all of that out the window because Luke Fickell's coming in. We're going to see a much different type of Wisconsin football. The things that are going to be consistent with Wisconsin is always going to be a good defensive football team. I always feel that way. It's just something in Wisconsin. The other thing, too, is Wisconsin, all you have to do is recruit the state of Wisconsin and maybe the state of Minnesota, that area, and you can produce NFL quality offensive linemen. It's something in the beer and the cheese and the beer cheese soup and the pretzels and all that stuff up there. It just makes great NFL offensive linemen. And Wisconsin's going to have probably a very solid offensive line. And then the fact is that even if Tanner Mordecai struggles, which I don't expect Tanner Mordecai to struggle that much coming in, he has an amazing partner in that backfield with Graham Mertz. But how good is Mordecai? You take a look and see what is Wisconsin getting. And here's my only hesitation, Preston. I'm going to turn this over to you here in a second. I'm getting Dillon Gabriel vibes, and I'm worried about that because last year we talked about Dillon Gabriel leaving UCF to go to Oklahoma. Man, this is such a great fit. Oh, man, look at all the great things that Dillon Gabriel did. Tanner Mordecai, 3,500 yards passing last year, 33 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Also wound up, he can run just a little bit there. Then you go back to 2021 with Tanner Mordecai, 3,600 yards passing, 39 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He's going to play behind a better offensive line. He's going to have a better running back next to him. Might not have as good of wide receivers because, again, Rice over there at SMU is a pretty darn good wide receiver. But, I think that there's so much to like about this Wisconsin team, but so much of it's unproven. And Fresh, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I think the biggest thing is a philosophical change in offense. There's no longer two tight ends, H-back, power I formation, play action offense. This is Phil Longo coming up from North Carolina, bringing the air raid offense to Wisconsin. They're going to have 4 or 5 receivers. So, if you're scrolling through channels and you see that game on, you see 4 or 5 receivers in the field, you're watching the right game. Don't change the channel. It's a completely different philosophy here. They haven't seen this probably ever, other than watching the Green Bay Packers and putting more than one receiver on the field at a time. So it's going to be a thing to get used to, but I think it's also going to give them a chance to compete. You're seeing the teams are evolving. Penn State's been doing it. Michigan's been doing it. Ohio State's been doing it for a long time. Offense in the Big Ten is evolving. And you've got to get away from the slow monotony that is Iowa football, which makes you want to just punch yourself in the face. This is what this offense is. You're going to have 4 or 5 receivers in the field. They had a bunch of transfers come in through the portal. Mordecai's going to be in shotgun. Braylon Allen's going to be getting a little different look from the running game position, not I formation. He's probably going to be in the shotgun, which actually might help him from an NFL perspective of learning how to play that flexible, more of a pro-style spread offense as opposed to being in this I formation because fullbacks are never used anymore. It's going to be a different look. Defenses in the Big Ten are going to have to be ready for it. It's not going to be the same. They're going to have to be prepared for a completely different philosophy and more of an open offense that's going to be coming after you. They're going to be attacking people. And that might hurt the offense. It might hurt the defense because it might be on off the field quick enough. But I think early on in the season they might because they're still trying to get a rhythm. But if they can get glued and they can get a camaraderie going and build that up and rapport for the season, later in the year it becomes an asset because they can score at a drop of a hat if they get pretty good at what they're supposed to do. Longo's put together an offense. He coached up Sam Howell, coached up Drake May. He knows what he's doing. The rest of it's obviously up to the weather in November, but if they can get some guys in and catch the football, it will help the entire team out. Defense will be a work in progress. They had a lot of guys come and go through the transfer portal. A lot of guys leave, like Herbig get drafted, and Benton get drafted. But Fickell, he knows what he's doing defensively. He brought his most entire staff from Cincinnati. They recruited, developed players there. Nobody thought Sauce Gardner was going to be the superstar player. The second he arrived in Cincinnati, they developed him into one of the best players in college football and one of the best players in the NFL. So give him time, let him trust. Fickell knows what he's doing. He learned from his 1 year at Ohio State on what it takes to be a head coach in the Big Ten. He has been there forever. He was at Cincinnati. He learned how to run a program consistently, Now he's going back for a second term in the Big Ten. I think this will be a much more successful tenure. You also brought up this is not last year was not what Badger football was. They were 7-6, but before that, 9-4 in 2021, 4-3 in the COVID year. In 2019, they were 10-4, Big Ten West champions. They went to the Rose Bowl and lost. 8-5 in 2018, then a 13-1 year in 2017, an 11-3 year in 2016, with the Orange Bowl and Cotton Bowl victories in both those years. This team is supposed to be at the top. This team should be playing in Indianapolis every year. That's their mentality. And that's their thought process. Last year was a complete just dumpster fire, and it had to be a complete reset. If it all goes to fail and Fickell struggles, this program might be set back a few years. This is a big gamble, though, because you're taking a lot of faith in Fickell, who won an AAC, and really only had a 2-year stretch there in 2020 and 21 before he took the big pay job. So if Fickell pays it off, this could be a big monster of a program returning to the prominent state. If not, Fickell could be looking to drop back down, but I think he's be ready to take this team to the next level and put Wisconsin in some spots they haven't seen, and maybe even truly compete for a top 10 national ranking year in and year out. Not just a 1 year in every 5 peaking up there. This could be a consistent program if he gets it right and recruits to Wisconsin. It's going to be a big year. This is the first season, though. That Washington State game, they lost last year in a clunker. Can they go on the road to Pullman, which is in literally the middle of nowhere, Washington, and get a win and do it impressively? After that, the schedule can kind of shakes up pretty good. They don't have Michigan. They do have Ohio State. They don't have Penn State. Can they survive? And I think their goal right now, just get to Indianapolis, win the Big Ten West. The biggest stretch, though, Iowa, Illinois, and Ohio State in October. If you take care of Iowa and Illinois, the Ohio State game, I think, is a push at that point. If you lose it, whatever. But if you take care of Illinois and Iowa, you put yourself a clear path to head to Indianapolis and might get Michigan, might get Ohio State, might get Penn State, but at least you put yourself where you should be and where your goal is for the year. Take your baby steps, win the Big Ten West, and then grow, develop the program from there if you're Luke Fickell. I think the floor is 7 wins if this team struggles to really gel, but the ceiling is 11 wins in a trip to Indianapolis in December.
7 wins is your floor. What? All right, Fresh. I gotta ask. What? All right. So walk me through their schedule real quick. Where are you seeing those 5 losses come?
This team has lost to Minnesota in the past. They've lost to Illinois. They lose to Northwestern on occasion. They lose to Iowa. They can lose to Nebraska. You don't know. Tanner Mordecai, we don't know what we're going to get truly from him. He was great at SMU, but again, playing against lesser defenses. Now you're playing in the Big Ten. What's this going to do? How's the weather going to play out? The spread offense isn't really built for Braylon Allen. He's not a scat back. He's a big thunder power I formation running back. How is he going to adapt? They lost a lot of talent on defense. They might have the transfer portal is one thing, but you get all the guys in there, completely different philosophy. How are they going to be able to stand up and play football? 7 wins, 11 wins. There's a lot that can happen. I don't know if I truly trust Mordecai as the gunslinger. If he struggles early, that's going to be a confidence problem. A lot can happen. Does the team buy into Longo's offense? Do these receivers that are coming in, what have they truly done before? None of these other superstars transfer. It's not like Jordan Addison's coming to Madison. How are they going to be able to buy in and play in this offense? It's going to take a quarterback that's mobile. Sam Howell and Drake May under Longo were mobile quarterbacks. Mordecai's not mobile. That's an element that's taken away from that offense, where he now has to sit in the pocket and throw the ball around as opposed to using his legs to create things happen. I don't know if that's going to be a philosophy thing. It's going to get him changed. He's going to make an adjustment, surprise me. How is Fickell going to get these guys who's never coached before to play at an elite level immediately? That's another thing. They're learning a whole new defense. You never know what's going to happen. I've seen them lose clunkers before. Like I said, they lost an overtime game to Michigan State. Michigan State's got off, so we'll see.
I'm tough on that one. I get you, and by all means, you take a look at it and say, all right, it's a tough one. I really feel like last year was a aberration instead of what will become the norm. And I think that everything I'm looking at with Wisconsin is pointing in a very positive manner. We didn't even talk about Bryson Green transferring from Oklahoma State over to Wisconsin. Bryson Green was Oklahoma State's leading receiver last year. He's their best wide receiver, and he's got a couple more years there. you take a look at C.J. Williams, who transferred from USC. Very talented freshman coming in. We'll see what he can develop. That wide receiver room at USC was very stacked. I think he's a great example of someone, hey, I'm a young guy in the depth chart. I'm moving over there into Wisconsin to get an opportunity there as well. Also, Fickell brings in 2 wide receivers from Cincinnati that he knows about. I take a look at this coaching staff, though, and again, I look at everything that, what Wisconsin can do. There's a name. Do you know who the defensive coordinator is?
Tressel.
It's which Tressel, though? Mike Tressel. Jim, and if you guys don't know, Mike Tressel is Jim Tressel's younger brother, and he is the Tressel family knows one thing really, really well: how to coach defense.
Tattoo parlors.
No,
sorry.
That's Terrell Pryor. That's Terrell Pryor. That had nothing to do with Mr. Tressel. You shut your mouth. Okay. Jim Tressel is a respectable gentleman. Stop this nonsense. Mike Tressel does know defense, and he is a very good defensive coach as well there. And I think he's going to do a really good job. I'm looking at Wisconsin. I think this Wisconsin, the schedule is built very nicely for Wisconsin. You take a look at the first 4 weeks. I believe that Luke Fickell is going to go over to Washington State and lose that game? No, I don't. I think that Fickell is going to be very fired up for this season. I think that he's learned quite a bit from his time over there at Cincinnati. And, we saw Cincinnati building, and then kind of crescendoing the last couple of years. The first 4 games, all of those are winnable games. That game at Purdue at nighttime on a Friday night, that's a little bit concerning, but not totally with that. I really think that we're going to see the Iowa game. That's at Camp Randall. Illinois, we've talked about this. Illinois lost a lot. It would not shock me to see Ohio State coming into Camp Randall on Halloween weekend facing a 7-0 Wisconsin team. And you want to talk about stuff that scares me? That's the Wisconsin game every single year for the entire time we were in college together to after college. And I hated going in and playing a really, really tough Wisconsin team in October. That would wind up, I guarantee you, that's going to wind up being a night game if Wisconsin's 7-0 and Ohio State is 7-0 or 6-1 or whatever either team is, even if Wisconsin's 6-1 and Ohio State's 7-0. And then you finish off the year very nicely with Indiana, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Minnesota. That Minnesota game at the end of the year is a trap game, and who knows what Nebraska is going to be. I see that the floor of this team, I'm going to go 9 wins. I'm saying the floor is 9 wins. I think that Tressel really turns this around, but I think that I would probably take the over there for the 9 wins. I'd say that their ceiling is 12. I'd say that they got, and again, if they can, Ohio State, it scares me. That's going to be a very, very tough game for the Buckeyes. I think Fickell could really do something special at Wisconsin.
So undefeated regular season going into Indianapolis.
I think it's possible. Again, things got to come together. I know we're both like on the extreme out of the, like kind of separated on this one. But hey, this is what our producer, Drew, said he wanted us to do. He said he wanted us to disagree more, so maybe we're giving him what he wants.
Yeah, I agree. I agree to disagree.
Yes, very true. Okay. Well, hey, we'll see what happens. That's why they play the games, and we get to just talk about this stuff in the preseason right now. But, all right, there is our first 5 in our top 25. That is 25 to 21. We will be recording our next set of top 5. Guys, remember, we are part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure if you're doing anything, go to spinnablesports.com. Check out the articles there. There's all sorts of stuff on Spinnable Sports. Fresh writes a bunch. I occasionally dabble in there. Our producer, Drew, does that as well. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. If you're watching this on the YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Spinnable Sport channel. Hit that notification bell because you're not going to want to miss any of our preview. We're going to go deep dive into 20 more teams here. We're going to break down conferences. We're going to then start getting into our predictions. We got an All-American team to release. We got all sorts of stuff. So you don't want to miss a single episode. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you get notified every single time we drop a new video. Leave us that 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from, because you guys know Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects. Hey, we already shouted out our producer, Drew, but got to give him a special thanks, because without him, none of this is possible. It's an exciting time for me. I'm rocking back and forth right now in my seat, which probably is going to drive people nuts, but I'm excited for college football. Can you blame me? We get actually talk about college football, and I get to go nuts about the Texas Red Raiders and why I think Wisconsin's going to be great this year. So allow me to rock in my chair right now. So Fresh is stoic over there. Look at that. If you guys are listening.
Stoic and locked in. Stoic and locked in. But you know what? Talking college football in the middle of the summer is better than talking about just about anything else. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, baseball season's a walking disaster right now. So, yeah, well, it is what it is. Guys, make sure you follow us on social media. We're on Twitter. We are cruising our way to 25,000 Twitter followers by the start of college football season. That's crazy. Make sure you check us out there, because we're going to throw out polls. Let you guys decide each week of certain games that we will cover in preview format, and keep it locked in on the Irrational Confidence podcast all year long. It's college football season, folks.
It's always college football season. And with that, bye, y'all.